Welcome to Athens Happens. I'm Ben Peters, a news editor at The New Political. Athens Happens is a weekly news podcast brought to you by TNP reporters dedicated to explaining the nuances of Athens and state politics. You can find new episodes every Friday at thenewpolitical.com, iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, SoundCloud, or wherever else podcasts can be downloaded. This week, we're going to discuss a lack of broadband internet access in the Athens area, how some residents deal with the lack of service, and what local organizations and state legislators are doing to improve connection across the county. Nolan Cramer, a staff writer at TNP, joins me to discuss broadband internet access in Athens and what local groups and state politicians are doing to combat the disparity in internet access the region faces. How are you, Nolan?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you?
I'm excellent. It's finals week. I'm sure everybody's very busy, very tired.
It's definitely been a long week.
So, can you explain to me and to the audience why there is such a significant lack of broadband access across the county?
So when you're looking at the county, and this issue doesn't pertain to the city of Athens itself, more to these rural outlying areas, a lot of these smaller towns. If you're a broadband provider and you're looking to put access in the county, you're not going to want to put in spots where there's not that many people living. So it's a huge cost to have to lay all these cables and have to get people to sign up for broadband. But if you don't have enough customers, you're not going to make your cost back on your investment to provide broadband here in the county.
So some of these remote areas where there's not that large of a population are the ones who are really struggling to get internet access.
That's
right?
correct.
As opposed to, an Ohio University student who lives in Bromley Hall, they got high quality university internet.
Yeah, when you're looking in the city, you're looking at a high population density. So you're looking at a bunch of houses right next to each other. So it's pretty easy for a broadband company to come and make their money back on their investment in the area while you just don't have as many customers in these rural areas.
So what areas in the county are particularly affected by this, like specifically?
You're looking at pretty much anywhere that isn't Athens City, and Nelsonville is pretty well covered, but pretty much anywhere else.
Okay.
There's not any of these small towns. They used to be these small mining factory towns. There's nothing. You're pretty much out of luck if you live there in terms of broadband.
And so, I mean, we live in a culture and a society where internet connection is paramount to your ability to participate in, just general communications or even like civic engagement. What are these people doing to try to get internet where they can't access it?
So they end up having to go to places that do have connection. Here, in the county, one of the biggest providers of broadband internet and Wi-Fi would be the library system. So a lot of times they'll be using library resources. They're free to use for anybody in the county, and that's usually their best bet. So I spoke with the director of the Athens County Public Library System and asked him about how much use they're seeing out of these services that they provide.
The amount of usage that the Wi-Fi gets at those locations is still dramatically larger than it is at many other locations. And, we close up at 6 o'clock most nights, open up at 10 o'clock most mornings, and it is not at all uncommon for me to arrive at the library in the morning and see people in the parking lot. It looks to be like contractors checking their email or people checking email before they have to go to work. I've seen people making FaceTime or Skype calls using our Wi-Fi from our parking lot just as the library is closing. So people, using it to stay in touch with each other, stay close to loved ones.
Nick Tepe is the director of the Athens County Public Library System.
Interestingly enough, one of the things on our Wi-Fi, we can see what sorts of activities people are doing on there. We can't see specifically what they're doing, but we can see the type of application being used. And updating their devices is one of the most common things that we see people using our Wi-Fi for, which makes sense if you think about it. If you're on a limited data plan, you don't want to update your device using the limited amount of data that you have. So you're going to do it where you can get access to Wi-Fi. So even just keeping their devices up to date and functional and secure is something that we're able to do for them. And while we do have some hours open when people are not at work, most of our hours are not when people are available if they're working. So people are going to stop by on their way home from work or on their way to work to take advantage of the Wi-Fi.
So you can still get internet access to the library whenever it's closed just by sitting in the parking lot, right?
Correct. It was something that leaders in the library system decided to implement a few years ago just because they really saw this need.
So it was a conscious decision they made to allow for that.
Yes.
Oh, that's
so they have the choice whether or not to keep the Wi-Fi on, and they decided that there was such a need for it in the community that they should keep it on, and they've seen many people use it.
What about people going into the library to use their internet services?
He says they see a lot of people also going in, not as much as using Wi-Fi. So just in terms of wireless connections, they're averaging about 20,000 hour-long sessions per month.
Oh, wow.
So definitely a huge demand. But then in terms of in-library computer sessions, they only saw just over 50,000 for the entirety of 2018.
So where are these libraries located?
So there's multiple branches, and they're located at various different cities. There's a couple locations here in Athens. There's one up near Nelsonville. So they're pretty well spread out for the county for anybody to go and use. So you're never too far away from a library here in the county.
And so there are local organizations and politicians who are working or say they're working to improve internet connection access across the county. What exactly are they trying to do?
It's really a lot about focusing on solutions.
Okay.
So now it's definitely established that there is this problem. They call it a digital desert. There's basically no access to broadband, and as time keeps going on, internet becomes more of a necessity. So these organizations are looking at improving broadband, what can be done, what steps need to be taken in order to advance broadband access here in the county. And various organizations are looking at this. One of the interesting organizations is the Athens County Economic Development Council. So they partnered up with the Buckeye Hills Regional Council and a couple other local organizations just recently to take a look at how big the issue actually is and to see, they basically came up with a list of proposals for what needs to be done in order to get these broadband companies to go to these rural areas and start providing access.
How did they measure that?
Really, it's just a lot of polling. There's some data by like the FCC. They go around and they create maps, but really it's assembling a team of people and just going out to different areas and seeing who has broadband and who doesn't. And a lot of this can also be found out by these providers. These providers are willing to give up, where they're located and where they actually have lines.
So what are some of their solutions that they've proposed?
So first of all, what they found was that 80 to 90% of households in what they call the rural expanse have no access to broadband services. And in this case, they're defining the rural expanse as areas with 20 or fewer households per square mile. So you think that's a good chunk of Athens County, these rural areas where there's not more than 20 households per square mile. And they found that 80 to 90% of them don't have broadband internet access, which they found to be a little bit higher than what the FCC was originally saying. And then they found that 75% of their study area, which was Athens County and Southeast Ohio, didn't hit the standard that the FCC set of what they call 25.3. So that's your internet speed. So you're looking at 25 megabytes of download, 3 megabytes of upload. So even if some of these people did have internet connections, it wasn't up to the FCC standard.
It was slow.
It was very slow.
So, they couldn't download or connect to the internet as fast as somebody in the city of Athens would, but they still do have access.
I mean, you're looking at when the Athens County Economic Development Council did their first study a few years back, they found that a lot of households still had like dial-up internet.
Oh, wow.
You needed to have a landline, and if you were going to use the internet, you couldn't use your phone at the same time. Like, you're looking at populations of people where we're about to enter 2020. They're at least 2 decades behind in terms of technology.
Yeah.
Like, this is outdated technology, and really there's no excuse for people to not have broadband after all this time.
That's kind of incredible. Are they bringing this information to legislators, state legislators, congressmen? What are they doing with it?
That's the plan. Right now, they're just kind of making it public information. So this most recent report that they released what's called Ohio Broadband Efforts, Observations, and Suggestions. And it's from the 20th of November. So this is just recent findings from this group. But what they did is they're hosting some public town halls coming up so that you can attend, and residents can actually hear what their proposed solutions are and what they think needs to be done.
Have they gone into specifics over what specifically are they proposing to do to fix the lack of broadband?
So their report has 4 points that they are saying are they say we need bold action to fix the issue, and their 4 points were: 1, they needed to create a broadband fund of $500 million for projects that directly connects 100% of unserved and underserved rural households and businesses in designated service areas. 2, they need to use a portion of the proposed $500 million fund to award zero-match planning grants to enable regional organizations to develop successful applications for federal broadband funding. 3, they needed to establish a steering community of rural broadband advocates to review applications for funding. 4, they needed to promote easier broadband fiber installation by passing legislation to enable fiber to be installed on existing utility poles without seeking separate assessments.
So it sounds like they want to use tax dollars.
That's correct.
To improve the connection in the area.
A lot of the talk has been federal grant money. There are federal grants that are kind of set aside for rural development, and so that's what they really want the area and state politicians to apply for, to then focus down towards this area.
And so what are the politicians' responses to these proposals?
So for the story I've been working on, I reached out to a wide variety of politicians, everybody from state representatives to the governor's office, pretty much any politician that could have any impact on this. And they all had this overlying theme that more needs to be done, which is a very obvious answer. And each politician kind of has their own way of how they want to get it done. So when looking at the governor's office, Lieutenant Governor Husted is actually a director of a group called Innovate Ohio, which is kind of the governor's office, their initiative to expand technology here in the state of Ohio. And that not only includes broadband access to rural areas, but anything business related that could help promote more business here in Ohio and kind of make it a leading player in the technology field. But part of what they do is this rural broadband initiative. So what they did is this Innovate Ohio with ODOT.
The Ohio Department of Transportation.
Correct. They issued a statewide broadband report that took a look at, like many other similar reports, what can be done. And so what they found is that we should be using the sides of these roadways. You're looking at like service roads, and you're looking at like telephone poles, that those can be ways to branch out using main like highways and expressways to send a broadband line down that way and then branch off. It's kind of the idea.
So install broadband lines underground next to the interstate, right?
Either underground or using poles that are alongside of the roads.
Oh, so, just like a regular electricity line.
Yes.
Gotcha.
So what they found is rights of way alongside state-owned interstate highways, they hold considerable value that can be leveraged to expand broadband. So, the state owns this property that are alongside these state-owned roads. So the idea is to use that property to help expand broadband lines, and then you can use those broadband lines to branch out.
I see. So that's the governor's office solution. So John Husted, Lieutenant Governor,
Correct.
Mike DeWine. What are other legislators saying?
So I reached out to Rob Portman's office, Senator. Yeah.
U.S. Senator Rob Portman.
Correct. And he recently spoke in front of, for a hearing. Let's see here if I can get the exact name. It was the Federal Communications Commission hearing where he talked about broadband access here in Southeast Ohio specifically, because while this is a statewide issue, you do see other rural areas that don't have great broadband access. It really kind of affects the Southeast Ohio area more, only because of our terrain. And Southeast Ohio is further away than most of these other rural areas from a large metropolitan area. So it just makes it a little more difficult to get broadband access here.
When you say terrain, what do you mean by that?
Just the elevation, hills, compared to take up near like Northwest Ohio, where I'm from. We have rural areas, and they don't have great broadband access. But it's way easier to get broadband lines there. It's all flat land.
I see.
So it just makes it a little trickier down here. But what he said to this at this hearing in October was he said that there are small businesses that are eager to expand into rural areas, but they're told that's going to be a long time and a big expense to get the ability to have fast internet. And so he said they tend to go to these urban areas. And he pointed out then, and this is a direct quote, he said Columbus is expanding substantially, but not Southeast Ohio. So he really sees Southeast Ohio as this area that could use these businesses and more business activity. But the lack of broadband is really turning away businesses from wanting to set up shop here.
I see.
They're way more likely to go to one of these metropolitan areas where they can have fast and reliable broadband.
So the lack of internet is stymieing economic growth, according to Portman.
Yes, and that's the same reason that the Athens County Economic Development Council was taking a look at broadband, was because their main initiative is to obviously promote a good atmosphere for businesses here in the area. And so internet access is essential to most businesses. I mean, they need to have a website, need to be connected. A lot of their point of sale systems are all internet based. They need this high-speed internet. So what Portman proposed was the Rural Act. And it's basically not only a broadband act, but it's just to preserve jobs and encourage infrastructure development by expanding tax-exempt areas and organizations. So really, it's just trying to make areas tax-exempt, so if you're a broadband provider, you can come in and lay your broadband lines, and you're not going to have to pay taxes on any area in which you're building in, or really anything for that matter, just because it's a benefit to society.
There's more incentive for somebody to come here maybe than there would be to go elsewhere.
Yes.
Financial incentive.
Yes. And so really that's kind of those are the two solutions. Either we need to get the grant money and start investing and paying the large amounts of money that these companies need to put broadband access in these rural areas, or we need to give some incentive to these providers to come in and want to do this on their own without the extra grant money.
Do you know what the status of that bill in the Senate is right now?
I do not. It was just recently introduced, so I think it's still waiting. It's still like for hearings and all that legislative stuff that needs to happen before there could be any vote on this legislation. So then I talked to just heard back from him today, Senator Brown's office.
Sherrod Brown.
Correct.
U.S. Senator.
Yes. And he actually provided us with a quote, and pretty much along the same lines as everybody else. He said that we know that more needs to be done to increase access to broadband in rural Ohio. It is only with continued federal investments that we can ensure our small businesses, families, students, and farmers have access to high-speed internet. I'll continue working with my colleagues across the aisle and businesses to secure investment for broadband projects that will improve the way Ohioans live, work, study, and enjoy their free time while attracting businesses and jobs. So really, you're looking at Senator Portman and Senator Brown, two politicians on different sides of the aisle, really voicing the same thing. It's a bipartisan issue and something everybody can agree on, that broadband needs to be expanded and that there needs to be the incentive there. And then his office provided me with some background about what he's done up to this point to try to fix this issue. And they said, as a member of the Senate Agricultural Committee, Brown successfully fought to increase the funding for rural broadband projects from $25 million to $350 million per year as part of the 2018 Farm Bill that became law. So you can see they're already working, all politicians are working really hard to make moves and really get these businesses and providers to come down here and start providing their access, because it really is a necessity.
Did you reach out to any any city figures, like, maybe Mayor Steve Patterson, any council members on what maybe the city of Athens is doing?
I did not, only because it isn't such a city issue as much as is the county. I reached out to the county commissioners and didn't hear anything back. So I reached out to them a couple times, but I mean, I felt like they'd be the best bet in terms of a county-wide issue and being a county politician who really have some good knowledge on the issue.
Did our state representative Jay Edwards chime in at all?
He did not, but I did hear back from Representative Stivers.
Steve Stivers?
I did.
The U.S. representative.
Correct, for most of Athens County and Southeast Ohio. And he kind of spoke the same thing too, that he said in the 21st century, broadband is no longer a luxury, it's a necessity. Lacking reliable internet access takes a toll on small business, on education, and even on health outcomes. And ensuring all corners of the 15th district are connected to the information highway is a high priority for me in Congress. So he said that's why I have held roundtables with local and state officials, internet providers, and organizations such as Connect Ohio, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and the Federal Communications Commission in order to better understand the problem.
And he's a Republican.
That's correct.
So, as you said before, this is a widely bipartisan issue. We have both senators and representatives on both sides of the aisle saying pretty explicitly, like, hey, this is a big issue in Southeast Ohio, and here X, Y, and Z, what we're doing to fix it.
That's true. And I think we're going to continue to see improvements. I mean, really, if you're from Athens County and the Athens area, you've understood for many years now how big of a problem this has been. But it seems like it's just starting to really get into the spotlight of all these politicians of how bad the problem actually is. I think recently there was a Wall Street Journal article, I think it was done by an Ohio University student.
So the story in the Wall Street Journal is by an Ohio University alumna, Liz Muhan? I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly. And did you read it, Nolan?
I did. I took a look at it, and it really looks specifically at the Athens area. So she also spoke with the director of the libraries down here, and he talked a little bit more about the numbers of people who were trying to access internet overnight at the libraries, and she did a really nice photo essay. It's photos of people sitting in their car in the dark with their phones out outside the library. But being in the Wall Street Journal, that brought a little bit more attention to it.
Yeah.
And then in response, Portman actually wrote a column that he put out that he titled Internet Access for Rural Ohio. And this is a pretty recent column. It came out on December 2nd.
Where was it published?
I don't know, because I couldn't find it, and it was sent to me as a press release from his office.
I see.
But he even spoke about Athens directly in there. He also spoke, it seems like everybody's speaking to the director of the libraries down here about the issue. But he talked about how stunned he was just by how many people were using the services overnight. And I think it really opened up Portman's eyes, too, on just how big of a issue it was. And he touched on pretty much the same points. He said, while it's cost-effective for bigger internet providers to cover urban areas, they often don't have the financial incentive to expand to these rural areas. And then once again, he brings up the Rural Act that he's trying to get through legislature.
Right. Was there anything else you'd like to add to this, Nolan?
I think that's it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate you coming on and doing all this work for us.
Thank you.
Because of the hard work of the staff here at the New Political, we are going to be supplying episodes of Athens Happens while we are not in Athens and we are on our winter break. So we're going to be having episodes with reporter Sarah Donaldson talking about the demolition of a historic Ohio University house. And we've also interviewed local officials. We've interviewed Damon Crane, who lost the mayoral race this past November. And we talked to Pat McGee, Councilmember McGee, who is going to be finishing his tenure at City Council, where he will be replaced by Beth Claudefelter, who we also spoke with for a full-fledged interview. So be on the lookout for all of these in the coming weeks, every Friday, just like usual. Thank you guys so much for listening. We hope you have a great holiday. And that wraps it up here on Athens Happens. Make sure to tune in every Friday for new episodes that shed light on the politics that impact all of our lives. Remember, you can find the show on the New Political's website, iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud, and on YouTube in a video podcast format. Also, be sure to check out our website at thenewpolitical.com, where we regularly report stories on what really happens here in Athens, and follow @thenewpolitical on social media. Thank you all so much. Have a great week.